Welcome to the FedLife podcast with Dan Sipe from Serving Those Who Serve. In this podcast, Dan draws from years of financial experience to help federal employees overcome challenges that every Fed can relate to. Join us for this journey as we reach, teach, and serve to help you make the right financial decisions. Now, on to the show.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the FedLife podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Dan Sipe. Additionally, I'm the branch manager here at Serving Those Who Serve and Sipe and Associates. As I always like to begin, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen, and thank you for your service. You don't hear it enough. You should hear it more. You will always hear it a lot from me. I know podcasts aren't supposed to have dates and times, but in this particular instance, Ed and I are joining you remotely. We're in different locations because we're based here in Maryland, adjacent to the district where we serve a lot of our feds. And as a result of the coronavirus outbreak, we are complying with social distancing. Our SCWS staff is all working remotely. We've been set up to do that for a bit, but we are still continuing to generate the best content we can to get information out to you as quickly as possible that is going to be valuable for you to know, and also to give you something to help pass the time as you work through this, because we are all in this together. And no matter what takes place with this particular challenge, we as a people of the United States of America have a 1,000 batting average in working our way back from that. I will always bet on us. I will always bet on my feds. We are going to get through this. We are going to come back well and strong, and we will be there with you. We are going to be part of this. So, again, thank you for your service, and also thank you for the role that you are going to play in this, because everybody's seeing the information that's coming across the news about what's being passed in Congress. A lot of times they forget that it's you, the feds, that are the hands and hearts of those initiatives. You will be the ones making sure that people get what they're supposed to get. And I thank you for that. And it is my hope that the people of the United States of America remember how important you are and that they are thankful to you as well. So moving on, we're back again today with the guru, the incomparable Ed Zurndorfer, as part of our ongoing mission to reach, teach, and serve you. At the outset, I need to say, as I always do, the opinions of our guest, Ed Zurndorfer, no matter how awesome they are not the opinions of Raymond James or Serving Those Who Serve. This podcast is presented for information only and is not to be taken as advice. All listeners should consult their personal advisors before taking any action. So, we are back with part 2 of our 2-part podcast covering the topic of taxes. We talked about the extensions and breaks that the IRS gave as a result of the coronavirus pandemic, which was a great thing for them to do. Now we're going to be tackling the tax consequences of withdrawals and rollovers and that type of thing from your TSP. Now, this is a really, really, really chewy topic, so let's start chewing. And folks, we all know that Ed is a wellspring of knowledge about federal benefits, but don't forget, he is also an enrolled agent with the IRS. He knows his stuff when it comes to taxes. He has a tax practice right here in Maryland. But once again, that being said, none of this podcast is meant to be taken as advice. Consult your own tax professional. Also remember that these will always mirror something that Ed has written in the Fed Zone, one of his articles. So you can find that at blog.stwserve.com or fed-zone.com. And a lot of times it's easy to have that on screen while you listen to it, or have it printed out and read it over. Read it on the Metro, or you're listening on your headphones, whatever works best for you. Read Ed all day, every day, especially while we're in this situation. Before we jump into this, due to time constraints, we're going to assume some general familiarity with TSP and terminologies. Remember, Ed's entire article is online, so you can read it. Okay, so we're going to assume a couple of things here when it comes to terminologies. So, Ed, with TSP, feds have a pretty convenient way of making contributions to their retirement by direct payroll deduction.
That's correct. I call it very, very convenient dollar cost averaging, putting the money on a regular basis.
Sure.
probably the best way to contribute to an IRA, to a retirement account, or any investment account is on a regular basis putting money in. And with payroll deduction, it's so convenient.
Sure, being consistent. Now, we want to also take a look, because understanding the consequences of TSP withdrawals, when you're taking the money out, that's a different story, right?
Taking the money out is more challenging because we get so many questions about that. What is the best way to take it out? What should you do? What should you not do? But there's one other aspect of that, taking the money out, that people sometimes may forget. The tax consequences of how to take the money out. Because depending on what type of account you have, what type of TSP account you have, there are different consequences of taking the money out and when, as far as how it's taxed and possible penalties.
Sure. So
it's very important that our TSP participants keep that in mind, because invariably, the questions come up, well, how should I invest it? I know I'm putting the money in, but investing it. Well, when they get to the point where they're going to retire, well, how should I take it out? And is there anything else I should know about? Invariably, it's going to say, yeah, there are tax consequences of taking the money out.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's start.
Go ahead.
Let's start generally. Okay, so generally, how are TSP payments, which means withdrawals, payments, etc., how would that be taxed?
Well, in general, payments from a participant's TSP account get taxed depending on whether the participant has traditional TSP money, Roth TSP money, or both. Also, keep in mind there are many of our listeners who may have served in the uniformed services and had TSP accounts, and when they put the money into the TSP while serving in a combat zone, the money they put in was tax-free compensation for when they were serving in the combat zone. That money is the contributions they made are going to come out also as tax-free. So it's a mixture here as far as how the payments are going to be taxed. And I'm the first to tell you, Dan, it's a little complicated.
Sure. So makes sense if it's traditional and I put my money in on a pre-tax basis and now I'm taking out, I'm going to be taxed. Roth, I put it in after tax, that's going to behave differently. And, let's touch a little bit about, what happens if somebody's got payments coming out that are a mix of the two?
Well, let me just say in general here that when it comes to a traditional TSP balance, any payment from a traditional participant's traditional balance is considered fully taxable income. And by the way, it's ordinary income, not it's not taxed as preferential income like capital gains or dividends. It's ordinary income like salary or wages. And the reason that it's fully taxable is because the contributions that were made with pre-tax dollars, before tax salary. And then the participant got earnings on those contributions, interest, dividends, capital gains that were also not taxed, or the taxes were deferred on that. So that everything coming out of the traditional TSP, contributions and earnings, are fully taxed. With a Roth TSP account, the contributions that were made with after-tax dollars. The contributions were coming from an individual's salary that was taxed, and the earnings are also growing at least tax-deferred, maybe tax-free, as we'll discuss here in a few moments, when they're pulled out. And there are requirements in order to pull that money out, the earnings to be pulled out tax-free. There are certain requirements. And if an individual has a mix, they're taking out money from both the traditional TSP and the Roth TSP, and you can do that now. You can specify where your withdrawals are coming from. Then the tax consequences are the taxes that are going to be paid are done proportionally depending on how much was taken out of each account. So it's a mixed bag.
Okay, got it. And now, from your article, we see that there are certain circumstances payments received from TSP might not only be taxable, but could be subject to a 10% penalty?
That's correct. That's correct, Dan. And this is also a little complicated, of course. If a federal employee retires sometime during or after the year they turn 55 and request withdrawals from their traditional TSP account, then the money coming out will not be subject to a 10% early withdrawal penalty. This is from the traditional TSP.
Gotcha.
Now, the key age here is age 55. Back in 2015, Congress passed a law that made an exception for one class of federal employees, namely air traffic controllers, law enforcement officials, and firefighters who can retire as early as age 50. Actually, they can retire at any age with 25 years of that type of service, or they could retire at age 50 with a minimum 20 years of that service. If a law enforcement official, firefighter, air traffic controller retires at age 50 or older, with at least 20 years of service, they can start taking TSP withdrawals at that point and not be subject to a 10% early withdrawal penalty. So that's one exception.
Sure.
But I emphasize they have to retire at age 50 or older. If they have, let's say, 25 years of service at age 49, they could retire, but they cannot start taking their TSP at that point because they didn't retire at age 50. If they do take their TSP at that point, then they're going to be subject to a 10% early withdrawal penalty. And people ask me, well, how long do I have to wait in order not to be subject to a 10% early withdrawal penalty? And the same thing can be true if somebody retired from federal service, let's say, on an early out. Let's say an individual is not law enforcement, not firefighter, not air traffic controller, and they retired with an early out. They had a voluntary separation incentive program or a VERA, Voluntary Early Retirement Authority, let's say at age 52. They had 25 years of service. They cannot start taking their TSP without being subject to a 10% early withdrawal penalty until age 59 and a half. Wow. So you have to retire sometime during the year you turn 55, or again, with this certain category of employees who can retire at age 50 with 20 years of service, they can start drawing your TSP without a 10% penalty right away. They don't have to wait till 59 and a half.
Okay. Now, Ed, if they have Roth balances...
That's a traditional TSP.
If they have Roth balances, how would that behave?
Okay, so if they have a Roth account, okay, in order to start taking the money out of the Roth TSP account, you have to fulfill two requirements. One, you have to be at least age 59 and a half to start your Roth TSP withdrawals. And two, it has to be at least 5 years since you made your very first Roth TSP contribution. I say 5 years. It's actually from January 1st, 5 years from January 1st of the first year you made your Roth TSP contribution. You have to fulfill those two requirements in order to take money out of your Roth TSP and not be subject to a 10% early withdrawal penalty, or for that matter, take it out. They're not going to allow you to take it out, but if for some reason you wanted to take the money out, let's say you had a hardship withdrawal, something like that, you would pay a 10% early withdrawal penalty in addition to tax on the earnings on the Roth TSP account.
Mm-hmm.
You can see there are different rules for taking the money out of the Roth TSP versus the traditional TSP.
Sure. So we have to follow the rules to make sure we stay on the right side of that. All right, so let's move on and let's take a look at TSP rollovers. Why don't you walk us through what a rollover is?
Okay, so a rollover is the following, Dan. If an individual TSP participant, has a traditional account, has a Roth account, decides one of their options for taking the money out is they can request a transfer or rollover. We'll discuss here in a moment the difference of their part of their TSP account or all their TSP account to an IRA. Now, it's going to be apples to apples here. So we're talking about rolling over or transferring a traditional TSP account to a traditional IRA, or rolling over the Roth IRA. The Roth TSP to a Roth IRA. With a rollover, what happens is the TSP will send the money to the TSP participant, and the TSP participant has 60 days from the time they get the money to put the money into the appropriate IRA. Mm-hmm. If they blow the 60-day period, then they're going to be taxed accordingly. It's considered to be then it was not a successful rollover, and the TSP is going to tax them on the amount that was taken out. That's called a rollover. On the other hand, if the TSP participant says to the TSP, I don't want the money to be sent to me. I want you to directly transfer the money from my traditional TSP to a traditional IRA, directly transfer my Roth TSP to a Roth IRA that I have established, then the person is not going to have to worry about any possible penalty, because the 60 days doesn't come into play here. Mm-hmm. There's no deadline because it's done directly. It's called a transfer, which is the safest way to go.
So transfer means I'm the Fed. I never touch the money. So it's going from where I was to where I want it to be.
That's correct. And people ask me, I got to pay tax on that money? And if I'm under 59.5, when it comes to the traditional TSP, I have to pay a 10% early withdrawal penalty? Yeah. If you took that money over, let me just say, if you're, let's say you have requested again from the traditional TSP. I had a very interesting question from one of the reps at Serving Those Who Serve. The individual requested had an IRA, by the way, had an IRA in this case, and they wanted to do a rollover from the IRA to another. The intention was to do a rollover. Right. So they actually wanted to but they were buying a house. They're going to buy a house. Okay. So they in order to buy another house, they had to sell their current house. Uh-huh. So in order to buy the new house, they took the money out of their IRA, with the intention is that they're going to sell their house and replace the money in the IRA. They're going to roll the money into the IRA once they sell their house. Gotcha. Well, it turned out that they couldn't sell their house. They couldn't sell the old house. Meantime they bought the new house. And they only could come up. They took out $100,000 to make it easier. But they only could come up with $50,000 to put back into the IRA, roll over back into the IRA.
Gotcha.
So the question is the IRS going to tax them on the $100,000 or the $50,000? Now, Dan,
please say it's the 50.
You're good at this. What do you think? What do you think the IRS is going to do? Are they going to tax them on the $100,000 or the $50,000?
I so from my heart and soul want it to be the 50. So that's the one I'm going to pick.
In case you're wrong, it's 100,000.
Ouch.
You remember when you were in school, Dan? You took a test and you thought you answered the question, and it was wrong. and you had it was English literature or whatever, history, or writing something up, and the professor, the teacher, wouldn't give you partial credit.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, the same thing is with the IRS. They don't give partial credit. I'm sorry.
Ouch. Okay, feds, don't do that. Don't let that happen to you.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. So, okay, right. Sorry, my compliance department. I know that sounds like advice, but forgive me, feds, don't do that. Okay, and so we know the IRS rules on this. Are there any rules that people should check about the receiving plans that they're going to send the money to? Should they check and make sure that where they want to send it can actually take it?
It's a very important point that they can make sure that before they file the form or fill out the form and submit it, TSP-70, I think that's the form number, to have it transferred to an IRA, that the plan will accept the money, because some plans, for some reason, may not accept it. Some IRAs may not accept it. So do your homework and check with whoever's going to get the money that they will accept this transfer.
Okay, that's an important point. And folks, remember, be sure to go to Ed's article in the Fed Zone, because again, as I said when we started, this is chewy stuff, and there's a lot to try and keep track of. And you want to be, able to do it right when you do it. So, Ed, let's break it into bits and pieces here, and talk some, because I know you give some great examples on hypotheticals and things like that. So, if somebody's doing rollover or transfer from traditional TSP, that's the one where we can really get popped if we make a mistake on that. So let's just reiterate those rules. So something coming out of traditional TSP as a transfer or rollover, what are our rules there?
I would only do a transfer. I really discourage any TSP participant from doing a rollover. It's too risky. With a rollover, again, the money comes to you. With a transfer, the money does not come to you. You don't touch the money. It never comes to you. So therefore, you want to make sure that the money doesn't come to you. This way, you'll not have the possibility that you're going to be subject to this 10% early withdrawal penalty. Or, in addition, by the way, with the rollover, I don't know if I made this clear. You're going to pay tax on that money. That did not go back into your account. You're going to pay tax on the money that was not successfully rolled over. So if you are before this, let's say in a 22% federal tax bracket, and then you wanted to roll over, let's say, $100,000 to an IRA, and you didn't do it, it was not successful, then you're going to pay tax. You're going to pay, and if you're underage, you're going to pay a 10% early withdrawal penalty, and you're going to pay the regular federal tax. But you said, well, it's only 22%. Well, wait a minute. We add the $100,000 to your other income. Now you may be in let's say, a 28% tax bracket, or maybe higher, depending. So, ouch. It hurts, and not to mention the state's going to get. If you live in a state that has a state income tax, you're going to pay state income tax on the unsuccessful rollover. Ouch. Okay.
And
too risky, Dan.
Gotcha. Transfer. We want transfer. Okay, so now let's
throw
another let's throw another hypothetical in here. So our feds have traditional and Roth, and they're going to follow your advice and do a transfer. They have to be careful where they send what, right?
That's correct. You should be very careful, in my opinion, where you're transferring the money. Traditional TSP ideally will go to a traditional IRA. Roth TSP can only go to a Roth IRA. A traditional TSP can go to a Roth IRA, but that is not advised, because that is a completely taxable event. If you directly transfer your traditional TSP to a Roth IRA, the amount of money you're transferring will be subject to full income tax, because you're going from something that's pre-tax to something that's after tax. And by the way, the TSP does not withhold any federal income tax from a transfer of a traditional TSP to a Roth IRA. You are responsible for paying any federal and state income tax resulting from a transfer of traditional TSP to a Roth IRA.
Gotcha.
One of the words of caution about the Roth TSP being transferred to a Roth IRA. A few moments ago, we talked about the requirement to take money out of the Roth TSP and not have the earnings subject to income tax. That is, it has to. If you want to take money out of your Roth TSP and not pay income tax on the earnings, the contributions were already taxed. They're not going to be taxed. It's just the earnings we're talking about here in the Roth TSP. In order to avoid paying tax on the earnings, you have to fulfill two requirements. You have to be at least age 59 and a half when you take the money out, and two, it has to be at least 5 years from January 1st of the year, at least 5 years from January 1st of the year that you made your very first Roth TSP contribution. Mm-hmm. So if you did not fulfill either requirement and you transferred your Roth TSP to a Roth IRA, if that Roth IRA had fulfilled the 5-year requirement for the Roth IRA, because Roth IRAs have the same requirements as the Roth TSP. If you want to take money out of your Roth IRA and not pay tax on the earnings that have accumulated in that Roth IRA, you have to be over 59 and a half, and two, it has to be at least 5 years since you made your very first Roth IRA contribution. Roth IRAs have been around since 1998.
Gotcha.
So if you made your first Roth IRA contribution, let's say in 2000, fine. It's 20 years after the fact. But if you didn't, it has not been at least 5 years, and let's say you transfer your Roth TSP to a Roth IRA, what's going to happen is, if that Roth IRA has already fulfilled the requirement, but the Roth TSP has not fulfilled the 5-year requirement, you're going to taint the Roth IRA. It's going to be ruined.
Ouch.
Okay, so what you got to do is you have to transfer it to a different Roth IRA. Call it a rollover Roth IRA, and leave your contributory Roth IRAs alone. Has to be a separate, because that's going to have a 5-year requirement too.
Okay, so Ed, so if somebody does that and now they get further down the road and they're both past the 5-year and they don't want to hold two accounts, could they combine them at some point?
Down the road, yes, they could. To combine them down the road once they fulfill the 5-year. Very interesting, Dan. I have a client. I do her taxes, and she's 72 years old, and she actually retired from federal service 2 years ago, and she came to me to get her taxes done, and she noticed that the Roth TSP was you have to take a required minimum distribution from the Roth TSP. So I said, yeah. She asked me about that, and says, yeah, you do. The Roth TSP has required minimum distribution rules.
Yes, it does.
But what she was so shocked about was they're taxing me on the earnings. I thought my Roth TSP was going to be tax-free completely, and here they're taxing me. What is this about? So I said, Michelle, when did you make your first Roth TSP contribution? Oh, it was back in 2018. She hadn't fulfilled the 5-year rule yet. So I said, once you reach the year 2023, at that point, it's going to be tax-free. But you're still within the 5-year period.
Gotcha.
So many people are not aware of this.
Lot of, like I said, folks, I told you this stuff is chewy. And remember what your mother and your grandmother and your older aunts always told you: chew your food so you don't choke on it. So remember, if you have any questions about this stuff, if you want to reach out to us at Serving Those Who Serve, that's great. We also have Ask Ed at stwserve.com. Don't guess at this. Do not guess at this. You have resources. We're going to answer the question. You know, if all you want is an answer, we're going to get you the answer. So take advantage of that. Okay, so there's more to TSP life than just transfers and rollovers. So let's talk about a couple of those. One of the things that I can see where somebody could really get tripped up is if they have a loan against their TSP and they go ahead and retire or sever. How's that going to impact them, Ed?
Many TSP participants they think that if they have a loan, they have to have the loan paid off by the time they retire. That's not true. The TSP will give them up to 90 days after they retire to get that loan paid off. But after 90 days comes by, they have not paid off the loan, then any unpaid balance on the loan, Dan, will be considered to be a distribution and subject to tax. And by the way, if we're talking about the traditional TSP and the person is under 59 and a half, when let's say they're 50, let's say they're 55, 56, 57, 58, sure. They're younger than 59 and a half, and they retire, and they have an unpaid balance on the loan, and they didn't get it paid off in 90 days, they will pay a 10% early withdrawal penalty in addition to regular tax on the unpaid balance of the loan.
Ouch. Again. Ouch again. Okay, so let's see if we can move away from the ouches here for a minute into just traditional taxation. A lot of our retired feds are receiving installment payments, okay, from TSP.
Yes.
And they're sort of used to it.
Yes.
Anything that could change the tax treatment of those payments?
In what sense, Dan?
No, I mean if they are set up and they've got their installments coming through, they're just going to have their normal withholding. There's really nothing. There's no ouches to be worried about in there. Correct?
That's correct. The only ouch you got to be aware of is that the TSP does not withhold state and local income taxes. So if the individual lives in a state and lives in a state that has an income tax, like Maryland, the district, and Virginia, the participant has to make arrangements to pay any state and local taxes due on those TSP withdrawals. And how would that be done? Through another source, or another, let's say they could have more money, more taxes, more state and local taxes taken out of their FERS annuity, CSRS annuity, or my recommended way would be through state estimated tax payments.
Okay.
Quarterly estimated tax payments. And my advice is, Dan, is that if you're in this position, please talk to a qualified tax professional in your state to make sure this is being done correctly. Being done correctly.
Sure. And if people are starting with one type of installment payment and they decide to change that up, are they going to have to adjust their withholdings?
Absolutely, because
Okay.
you may say you want to have you may want to go from, let's say, monthly payments to quarterly payments. You can vary the amount. You may all of a sudden say, "Hey, these installment payments are not enough. I need to buy a car. I want to take out make a partial withdrawal. Anything that's going to result in more income as a result of changes really requires asking the question, what are the federal and state income tax consequences? We have to think taxes here, because when it comes to the traditional TSP, I know that the federal government and the state governments are putting their hands out. It's time to pay up.
Gotcha.
They're waiting.
Gotcha.
They're waiting.
Gotcha. And again, we do live in a great country, and it takes money to run it. So, that's probably fair. But the biggest takeaway here is that you just need to pay attention to the things you're doing. And if you are doing it and you don't absolutely know that you have the right answer, get help. call and ask somebody, call a qualified professional. And if it's going to be something that's pretty straightforward in the way of a question, fire it into asked at stwserve.com. That's asked at stwserve.com. All right, wow, brother, you've done it again. You've taken a really daunting topic that nobody wants to talk about. You made it understandable, accessible for our feds. It's incredible. I don't know how you do it, folks. That's a wrap. Ed and I will be back again and again and again. As part of our work to reach, teach, and serve you. We are serving this to serve. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast on YouTube channel and now also on Spotify. And remember to share it with friends and strangers. And I am serious about that because we have regular listeners right now. We see the numbers going up. We're very gratified by that. If each one will tell somebody about this, we're going to be able to get even more information out, even more information out, even more information out. And you've heard it. I mean, Ed is the best, and getting that out is really, really important. Check us out on Twitter and LinkedIn. Be sure to watch that because a lot of members of our team are working really, really hard while we are in remote work. They're kicking out new content and video. Check out Benefits Ben on our website and the blog at blog.stwserve.com. You can also reach it at fed-zone.com, where you can read Ed every single week now. We've upped that up, and he's kicking out extra ones as we go. We absolutely will be returning live. That is going to happen. Right now, we are respecting the sensible approach for social distancing. So we have suspended our live seminars, but we have them booked all the way out for the next 12 months. We have them ready to go. We are adding additional ones to catch up for the ones that you might not be able to make. We are going to be there to help you and take care of you. Again, read Ed every week now at blog.stwserve.com and also fed-zone.com. So for Ed, the crew at Serving Those Who Serve, and me, Dan Sipe, good luck, Godspeed. Above all, remember, it's your FedLife. Make it a great one because you deserve it. And please stay safe, stay well. We need you, and we will be there for you. We're going to get through this together. Thank you, everyone. We are out.
Thank you for listening to the FedLife podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Serving Those Who Serve or Raymond James. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. Securities offered through Raymond James Financial Services Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Raymond James Financial Services Advisors Incorporated. Serving Those Who Serve is not a registered broker-dealer and is independent of Raymond James Financial Services.
Raymond James is not affiliated and does not endorse the opinions or services of any of the quoted professionals or their respective firms. Any opinions are those of Dan Sipe and not necessarily those of RJFS or Raymond James. This case study is for illustrative purposes only. Individual cases will vary. Raymond James is not affiliated with and does not endorse the opinions or services of the quoted professionals or their respective organizations.
Neither Raymond James Financial Services nor any Raymond James financial advisor renders advice on tax issues. These matters should be discussed with the appropriate professional. Investing involves risk, and you may incur a profit or loss regardless of strategy selected, including diversification and asset allocation.